Hello, happy Monday, and welcome to Bold Moves with Mandy Bryce. This is episode number 93, and today I spoke with Macy Matarazzo, who is a fascinating and colorful woman. If you haven't seen the video, if you're listening as opposed to watching, I definitely recommend checking out the show notes because everything is bright and colorful and beautiful, and I love it. She is a love and relationship coach and has a very fascinating story of how she made her way into her ideal relationship and then figured that it would be a great idea to help others learn how to do the same thing. A lot of great self-discovery and really fascinating conversation. I'm excited for you to listen to it, and without further ado, here is our guest, Macy. Hello everyone, I am with Macy Matarazzo. And I am really excited. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can see that she is so bright and colorful. Everything around her is bright and colorful, so I'm sure her story will be the same. Welcome, Macy.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here too.
I'm glad to hear you're doing so well. So where in the world are you speaking from right now?
Yeah, I'm in Longmont, Colorado. So it's kind of
Okay.
near Boulder, Colorado.
Okay, awesome. I love Boulder. I only spent one day there, but I adored the whole town.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It reminds me of where I went to undergrad, which is UW-Madison. Have you ever been to Madison, Wisconsin?
No, but I heard it was really a fun place to be.
It absolutely was. I miss it. I haven't been back in a couple of years. I need to make it happen.
Yeah.
So, as you know, the name of the podcast is Bold Moves, and the reason why you're on it is because in addition to your bold hairstyle and all your bright colors, you have made some bold moves in life. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your story and what you do?
Yeah, well, I used to be in corporate America for a long time, and I always struggled with that. I just never felt like I fit in,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of my story in terms of how I got into my work as a love and relationship coach too, is, how we don't feel like we fit in or that there's something wrong with us. And
Mm-hmm.
and I really felt like that in corporate America, but I, grew up in a time where we were told we could do anything,
Sure.
and I really wanted to be successful, make money, take care of myself. And I grew up in with parents telling me, you really can do everything.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to wait for a husband or think that you can't have a job and be healthy and have a home, like all of it. So it's a
Right.
lot of stress really to want to do it all.
Sure.
So I guess if I were to claim one of my boldest moves was to move from a really sort of secure six-figure job
Mm-hmm.
to coming in and doing my own thing and really finally breaking out of that, because it was a really difficult decision, and it sort of hovered over me for many years. And finally I did it, and now I've built a really successful love coaching business, and where I have bold moves that happen every day.
Usually when I have somebody on, most of the time people who make bold moves don't just make one. So I'm
Yeah.
not surprised by that at all. I
Yeah.
want to backtrack a little bit, and I have so many questions about your story and what you do. But the first one that's interesting to me is I think we both had the same type of upbringing, at least in the sense that our parents or whoever raised you encouraged us completely. Like, I got the same message. You can do anything. I mean, you can do everything. And I have never heard, like, I've thought of it, the only way I've able to made it a setback is when I talk to people who were discouraged by their family or friends or an adult and use that to fuel them. For example, my
Mhm.
husband had a sixth grade basketball coach who cut him from the team and said, I can teach you to play basketball, but I can't teach you to grow. He's a little half Pacific Islander. Now he's 5'11", but that's not tall for a basketball player. And it certainly wasn't when he was in 6th grade and he wasn't 5'11". And he used that to really propel himself and push himself and ended up playing for an NCAA Division I school. So I feel like sometimes if things go too well, you're comfortable and you're like, oh yeah, I can do anything. And then you just kind of don't.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to hear your perspective, because you mentioned that that was pressure for you to feel like you had to do everything. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And, maybe it's more that I just expected that I could do everything. And
sure.
And so some of the setbacks that come with that is having a hard time being able to receive support or be okay not doing everything. I mean, it can be really easy to get into that perfectionist kind of mindset. And really, I think that I also took it more as a focus on the professional and on success and making money. And that always seemed like it had to be the most important thing. And what I know now, and especially with the work I do with women, is that, our relationships are really, really important. And that's something that we're not necessarily taught. I feel like the business aspect is kind of straightforward, like get a good resume, get some experience, and go out there, be confident, and make money. Sure. And I think what was missing was that focus on healthy, loving relationships and that inner work.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I can definitely relate to what you were saying at the beginning of your answer about perfectionism. And for a long time, and I'm still not great at it, but I'm getting better, I couldn't take any criticism, and failures really knocked me on my rear end. And I'm trying to get better at failing and learning from it and receiving help and love in the form of criticism.
Oh, that is so true. And I think that is such an amazing lesson, because I notice I'm really sensitive still. Like I still want to be doing it right.
Right.
And at the same time, it is part of my practice now to not take things so personally.
Sure. I love that. So then my next question would be, you mentioned one of your biggest, boldest moves was leaving the 6-figure job to start your own business as a love coach. I'd like to know what you were doing before and then kind of your path to where you are now, because that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was doing a lot of different work as a contractor mostly.
Okay.
And in project management, and then I got into change management and a little bit into innovation in corporations, which actually some of that was interesting to me.
Sure.
Honestly, most of the years as being a project manager or program manager in technology was really as far from aligned with my heart as you can possibly get. I mean, I certainly like being a leader and I like being part of a team, but it was pretty painful to fake it. And I felt like I was really denying my soul and my truth so much. And when you think about how much time we spend in our jobs, well, that was more of my time I was denying my truth and denying what I really wanted to express than not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's another thing, because, big part of my healing journey is around relationships. So when I had spent that much time and that many years kind of living a lie in a way, it made it really hard for me to connect with me and really know who I was to even bring into a relationship. So that other aspect that's so sacred in life was failing.
That makes complete sense. So, how did you decide that you were done doing that and then that it was time to become a love and relationship coach? What was that transition like?
Well, that was pretty interesting because I think the universe really tries really hard to help us. I mean, it really is supporting us.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I kept running to that security blanket of the next contract or the next project. And after a while, my security blankets were just being siphoned out.
Okay.
So in my last job, I had one person that I was like, okay, well, at least she's here. And then I wasn't on her team anymore. And then at least I can work from home a couple days. And then that was gone. And then pretty much all my security blankets were gone. And I felt like I had no choice. I really felt like there was nothing that it wasn't even a single crumb. So I decided I just need to go. I just need to do this. And it was, years of other work on the side, my own personal development and healing and yoga practice and meditation that was also opening up space for me to be able to take this leap. But I'll be honest, I leaped with no plan, and I don't necessarily recommend that.
Did you at least have like a savings backing you up, or
a little
was it just one day I'm done, and even if I have to, get some terrible minimum wage job, I'll still not be doing what I'm doing, and that's fine? Or tell me a little more.
I didn't have that. What I did have was an idea. And I remember, and this may have been part of what we talk about, the universe really does come to support us in our favor. And if we take a step, then the universe takes a bigger step.
Sure.
And that I really experienced because I had met a business coach and decided, and I had an idea. That was it. I had an idea, just a little glimmer of an idea that I could help people through accessing their energy of play, which is not a business, really. So, but that was enough to inspire me to contact a business coach and start working with her. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was still in my other job. And then all my security blankets went out. So it was almost like, okay, here you have a new kind of security blanket. Your job's not working for you anymore.
Right.
Take the leap. And then within a month of leaping, I had a business up online. Sure. And within a month after that, I had my first 2 clients. So there is something to be said for, jumping into the fire in terms of how it motivates you to make stuff happen.
Yeah, that makes sense completely. So tell me a little bit more about, how did you describe it, your love for play or expression through play?
Yeah, I mean, it was just this idea that that when we're in that lighter energy of amusement and play, and my background is in art and theater in terms of education. Yeah. I've certainly steered away from that pretty fast. But I always was making art and in theater. I'm an improviser, so I was really heavy into that. And I just recognized how much freedom we have when we can access that playful side of ourselves.
Sure.
And I know from me personally in my relationship space, when I was working on, I really decided, I really want to meet my person. I really want to finally find that person, which I love your love story, by the way.
Thank you.
That I came into a different energy around that too. I mean, I was 43 when I finally got married for the first time. So it took me a while. So there was something that didn't totally make sense. And I think that's kind of what intuition really is when you get those downloads and it doesn't really make sense. And it was the first step. And then I learned a lot more about, deciding who I was going to support. And what I did discover was that I had been already helping people find love for years. And I was just doing it for free. I didn't even realize it was a thing I could do as a business. And that's what the business coaching really helped me do, was to pinpoint
what you're great at and figure out how to monetize
and claim it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to go back a little bit to the play thing again.
Yeah.
And anybody who listens routinely to my podcast knows that as much as it is my goal to inspire other people to follow their dreams, I do take a selfish turn here and there. And, since I'm talking to experts, try to learn what I can for myself too. And I would say I'm fun and I have a great sense of humor, but I am terrible at playing. Like most of the time, it doesn't sound appealing to me. On vacation, my husband sometimes has to make me not work because I just want to do that. And for me, playful is more of just in my mind. And he's more of a let's physically play catch or let's run around. And so it's kind of challenging because he wants to play and I'm like, can we watch a movie? Can we read the same book? So what kind of tips or insight do you have around someone who doesn't really know how to play and it doesn't come naturally?
Yeah, well, I mean, taking an improv class is a real easy way to really challenge that for you if you haven't ever felt like you could play. I mean, it really is a great way for just to be present in a new way and to laugh more. I mean, play, I think, comes in so many different ways, and how we use our imagination and how we even check in to what we did as a child, like what we thought was fun then. And I also really think of it as a lightness of being.
Okay.
In the way we approach things, where we're just lighten the situation just in our bodies. I'm sure you feel that with physical stuff too. It's like you can shake off that energy, not take things so seriously, maybe even watch a funny movie and give yourself space to not be so serious. And sometimes it's just a matter of just shifting it within your body.
That makes sense to me. When I think back as a kid, I wasn't really into playing either. I was a lot, again, into reading and making art. And so
That's play.
Yeah, the mindset, it's just that it's not playing games per se, or I prefer board games. I like to work out. I love it, but I, for some reason, just don't enjoy sports.
I think that's it though. It's really accessing our imagination and creativity and letting go of the seriousness. So whatever that means for you, I feel like my play is doing creative stuff. So even when you're creating a new offering for your clients, that can come with the energy of play. It's really that excitement. And so any creativity is great. And even the way you approach just sitting down to read a book. Are you approaching it in a way that it's like, I have to read 5 chapters today? Or is it just, I'm just going to chill out?
Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you so much for clearing that up and giving me a little reassurance there. So the change from the focus on play to love coaching, is that something that your business coach led you to? Is that something that intuition led you to? Or are they really kind of tied together and you just figured out that was the way to serve?
Yeah, they're tied together. Really, when we talk about business, I think one of the things that I thought was the most powerful question to ask was, what is that pain that your clients have that you can help with? And she just said it's either around their career, around their health, around love, or money. I mean, there really are only a couple doorways. So play isn't a doorway. She said that's sort of a means of shifting. So what I knew was that, once she asked me that question, I thought, oh, well, my biggest success is in how I moved from, attracting the wrong people and getting into the wrong relationships over and over and over again, and breaking that cycle and coming into a real meaningful relationship. And those things I was able to teach other people, and they were having success. And really the energy behind that is play, because I believe you can play into love if we're in a place where we're in our just most elevated selves, doing those things we love. And I'm sure you and your husband just look so just delightful together. That delight is play.
Sure.
And I'm sure you found each other because you were doing those things that you loved, and you were really honest with what you want to do on the planet. And that becomes a really attractive feature.
I love that. So you kind of set me up for a question I probably wasn't going to ask so soon, but if you know it, great. I'd love to hear it. If not, it's cool. Like, I know that this is like a big question, but what would you say your purpose is?
I would say my purpose really is to help people really embrace everything about them and really have a sense of who they are, including the light, the dark, all of that. And
Sure.
And that is really what I personally want to represent. And that's really the personal work I do. I mean, my program is called Big Happy Love.
Yeah.
And that's because that's been the hardest thing for me to do, is to really understand self-love myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting because you're the second love and relationship or dating coach that I've interviewed on the podcast. And while it seems that your approaches are almost polar opposite as far as the process, it's interesting that you both say the same thing, that, you know, it all comes down to knowing and loving yourself first. So his thing was that he trained love athletes. So he like broke it down to almost an Olympic strength and conditioning coach would, where it's very serious and very regimented. And if you can get better at a sport, you can get better at being the perfect partner and finding the perfect partner. Whereas yours seems a lot more lighthearted and less serious, going with your play theme.
Yeah.
But you both are like, okay, first thing you need to do is know yourself and love yourself. So I think that that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. I mean, people need to hear things different ways in order for them to step into it for themselves. So that's awesome. It's great to hear different language.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thing I'm curious about is you mentioned a little bit of your personal experience of having a lot of issues initially and then kind of figuring it out. Where are you currently in your love life?
I have an amazing little husband. And he is the kind of person that I truly never thought I could have. I just didn't think I would ever meet someone who could match me in the ways that he matches me. And so that's where it really was so contagious, I think, in terms of how I started helping other people, because I was so blown away by what I did. Because the practices that I did, I obviously incorporate into my programs.
Of course,
and they're not just things that I made up. It was really getting the best information possible,
right,
in terms of even the science of it, because I was so sick of being single, and I was so wanting a real loving partnership. It was really important to me to have that in my life and share life with someone. So Larry is my partner. He's a chiropractor, and he's really silly, and he's really funky, and he's successful and loving, and we have a lot of good times together.
I love it. That's so awesome. How did Larry work into your timeline as far as quitting your old job, starting your business?
Oh, well, I met him And this is an important thing too, what a relationship can offer us, because I didn't quit my job until I was already married and in this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what allowed me the freedom to even leave corporate world was that I had a shared life with someone.
Sure.
I mean, practically, life is easier when you're with another person, and being single is pretty expensive. I had my own house. I had all my, I was really working to keep up my life.
Sure.
So, and I also believe that the more that we do this kind of personal development work, starting with ourselves,
Sure.
it really does naturally ripple out to all areas of our life, how we feel in our bodies, how we look, how we are in our business. Actually, what I did notice too was that when I first met Larry in my corporate world, that started growing. And I think, when we're supported,
Mm-hmm.
there's some freedom. There's just more room to manifest and grow. And just having that support is just so empowering. Not to say that you have to have a person, but it kind of is a huge part of being a human being, is we're here to connect.
Sure.
So also, I want any woman out there who's listening to this to recognize that if you want this, if you want a meaningful relationship,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it makes sense. So give yourself permission to make that important.
I love that. So now you just said specifically, if you're a woman and you're listening to this, is that your targeted clientele, or do you work with men as well?
I have worked with men, but I do primarily work with women.
Okay. Any specific reason?
Because I just enjoy that, and I feel like there is a lot of the teachings I offer. I mean, it could work with men too. I don't think that that's a problem, but I've just specifically chose to target women in my work.
I think a lot of times it's easier to understand someone who's more like you anyway, so that makes sense. I just think about all of the people I know that are single and could benefit potentially from what you have to offer. Yeah. And it's not just women, but if it makes more sense that way.
I mean, I definitely have worked with some men who have reached out and it just seemed like a fit. So It's not out of the question. And truly, that message does make sense for men too. I think we just think that, wow, there must be something wrong with me if I need help finding love. Oh, I should just let it happen. Oh, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And we just wouldn't ever do that in any other area of our life. So I feel like that was part of my own challenge, was that I just thought it was going to happen. And it took me decades to actually just stop and say, you know what? I really want to figure this relationship thing out.
Right.
Like I would getting a promotion or finding the right house for me in a city. You do research and you figure, you get support. So
yes, my cat is joining. I've been out of town for a few days, so
my gosh, it's the biggest cat I've ever seen.
He weighs 22 pounds.
Oh, I'm in love.
Here, this is Fujio.
Oh my gosh, I love giant fluffy kitties. Well, we have Gary here.
Oh my goodness. Gary's a Chihuahua and he's so cute, in case anyone's listening and not watching.
Yes.
I love how he's right next to you too.
Kind of, he's not what I would necessarily label a healthy relationship.
Fair enough. I'm going to go back to something that you said that was really interesting that I never considered that way. And it's just kind of an interesting statement about
perspective.
society, that how you mentioned that there's like a stigma around needing help finding someone to be with. And it kind of reminds me of, even though they're completely incomparable, the whole stigma around mental health issues, where like if you broke your arm or have cancer or something, it's completely acceptable to see a doctor, but therapy is like a big weird thing that everyone's afraid of, which I think everyone should, if they can find the way to do it, go to therapy, because I think it helps everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, like you said, if you want to get better at something or accomplish something, it makes complete sense to seek out an expert or do research or all of the above. And why should that be a problem in relationships?
Yeah.
There's a NPR podcast
Yeah.
called Hidden Brain. Have you ever heard of it?
No, but that sounds amazing.
It is. And they had an episode about how relationships are so hard now because of technology. For
Mm-hmm.
example, with Tinder, it's that instant gratification where if you can like look at someone's profile, and if you don't like one tiny thing about them, you swipe one way. And if they're cool, you swipe the other way. And it's just like makes you feel like you're so picky, and like people are just almost like ordering food at a restaurant or something.
Yeah.
Just crazy. Have you noticed anything with technology helping or hurting? I suppose like because you're able to use the internet to reach people, that could be a positive aspect of our current times and relationships. But I'm curious to hear what you think about that, and maybe unpacking a little more the stigma around getting help finding somebody.
Yeah. I am so glad you said that. I got total chills when you said that about, you paralleled it with the mental health stigma thing, because I do think that's completely similar. It really is.
Yeah,
Um, because it's just such a human need for
right.
us to be in connection, and how many business podcasts I've listened to where all of a sudden they're talking about relationships. It always comes back to relationships. And
Right.
so it's really, really, really true. And I feel like if we can just start just giving ourselves the blessing of nurturing and learning about relationships. We don't learn it in school. Let's just
Right.
all admit that. So if we are struggling, yes, get help.
Yeah.
But then to the next piece around technology, um, yeah, I mean, I just think that in this world where we have so much information, there's just the general overwhelm that happens anyway.
Hmm.
So once again, it just really is so important how we take care of ourselves. I mean, we have to manage our own environments and our own being and our own between our heads. And yes, I think the technology can create more neuroses. And I also believe that once we can come back to ourselves and get really clear on what it is we want to create in our relationship and come from a loving place. And this really is a choice. Like we can easily get into judgment and thinking that, oh, it's just like an app or an online dating tool, and we bring a different energy. This is the play thing again. It's like, what is that energy and the intention that we bring to all of these connections?
Hmm.
I mean, if we think about every thing that we're doing is essentially a relationship.
Yeah.
So if we boil it down to that, what are we bringing to our relationships? Our relationships to even the way we date, the relationships to our computer, the relationship to everything. If we learn and start training ourselves to come to it with love, then we can make more choices through that lens. That sounds probably total woo-woo or whatever, but it's really the bottom line is how we can show up in love.
Sure. And that doesn't sound woo to me, but maybe we're more on the same page than some other
Yeah.
people. But even like we said, going back to, loving yourself, the way that I look at the things that I do or don't accomplish in a day can really affect my mood tremendously. And if I come from a place of love, like, look what you actually did, as opposed to what's on my list that I didn't do, or,
Mhm.
if I take a nap, don't beat myself up over it. My body needs to rest type of a thing. It can really impact how I perform the whole rest of the day or tomorrow. If I'm thinking about yesterday, like yesterday was a waste, I didn't do enough, or versus, wow, I, was kind to myself and let myself take a nap and I still got all of these other things done. It's a
Yeah.
game changer.
Yeah, I think that is so good. And I heard one of the things I teach is just remembering that these online tools, and yes, people may have multiple intentions. There may be people out there who actually really aren't wanting a long-term meaningful relationship. That could definitely be true. But if we can just really remember they're human beings.
Right.
They're humans
Exactly.
behind there, and not come at it with, oh, I can't believe this guy liked me. Oh, gross, this, that. It's just like, well, if it's not a match, just let it go. And then these things aren't necessarily easy practices, but in a lot of my workshops, I kind of go through a matrix of the different kinds of relationships that can show up.
Sure.
Depending on where we are in our own kind of consciousness of it.
Right.
So it is, once it always comes back to us. It comes back to us and how we're in relationship with ourselves.
Sure. I love that. Now, you spoke about your workshops. How is it through workshops that you work with people? Or let's say someone's listening and is like, okay, I love what Macy is saying. I want help. And there's no stigma around wanting help for that. How does someone get a hold of you? And then what do you do with that person?
Well, if anyone's interested in doing a webinar with me, they certainly can go to my website and get my free guide.
Okay.
Which is on there. Right now it's called Find That Perfect Guy.
Okay.
And sometimes I change the name. So right now it's called that. So there will always be something free there. If you opt in for a free gift, and then you'll be invited to the most recent webinar I have available.
Okay.
And certainly I like to do them regularly just to have an experience of my work. And
okay.
It's worth doing because it's really great awareness as to where you may have the blocks. Once you know that, then we can work on that.
Okay. And then I will definitely have your website in the show notes, but if someone is driving and wants to go to it when they're somewhere else, what is your website?
It's theloveadvantage.com.
Okay, perfect. That should be easy for people to remember. And since we did chat about your ideal client or usual client versus, sometimes exceptions that you make, if a heterosexual gentleman is listening and is not looking to find the perfect guide, the perfect guy guide, would that freebie still be a great fit for him and he should still go and check it out, or maybe not?
Yeah, the roots of it are for everyone, really.
Okay.
And the roots of it are really applied. It's more of a spiritual thing, I think, and an awareness. So certainly the principles are human.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. I just thought I would clear that up in case any gentlemen are listening, and I wouldn't want them to miss out on what you have to offer because they're not looking for the perfect guy. So I am.
Well, and it works with straight people or gay people. I mean, it really is about relationships in general. So I think that it's such a powerful awareness.
That's a great thing. I'm glad that you mentioned it like that, because by default, I didn't even think to ask about the homosexual lady that might not be looking for the perfect guy. But I'm glad that you added that too, because that's definitely important, and I don't want to marginalize anyone. So thank you for that.
Sure.
You mentioned that these are human principles, so I'm sure you have some great advice, and this could be in your niche of finding love and play or otherwise, but I always like to ask people what kind of advice that they have to pass on. So anything you've heard or learned that you think everyone should know, what would you say?
I think in this space and in any space that you want to create change,
Mm-hmm.
it's really right away about making that a priority and being honest about that. So kind of to your point about how we treat mental health differently.
Mm-hmm.
We know we want help, but we don't do anything about it, and we're not being honest with what really matters. So being honest with yourselves and say, okay, this is something I really want. I noticed that change in me.
Mm-hmm.
The year that I met my beloved, it was a very honest, direct, this is it. It was no longer a back burner, peripheral thing. It was now right in front of me, and that was my focus. So making it a priority, I think, is a huge piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'll give a couple tips. Getting really clear on what it is you want. Clarity is everything, and that in relationship space and in business. I mean, these things are very global if you want to practice them that way.
Sure.
Getting clear, knowing your values, knowing what it is that really matters to you, being honest with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because often what I see is people come to their vision from a place of lack,
Right.
from a place of, oh, well, I probably can't get that, so I will just talk to this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the teaching that we want to bring it up to, what is it that you ultimately feel in your heart?
Mm-hmm.
And name it. That's scary.
Right.
You talked about fear of failure and how hard that is at the very beginning. It's scary to think that I'm going to make this a priority. I'm going to ask for exactly what I want. And what if I don't get it? Well, then I really am broken. So that's where then we want to make sure that we are addressing the emotional blocks so that we're not repeating patterns, because and I think that's what happens with the technology. It just really reinforces those old beliefs. See, nobody likes me. I'll be single forever. And I only attract losers. And like the technology is just going to magnify those beliefs and continue to support you in that, because it's just going to keep you where you are.
Right.
So then that brings me to the next piece, which is getting help. Just get help. And I'm not saying that just because I can offer that help, but truly because, you see it with health, right? And all of the ways that, someone coming together with another person and an expert or someone is only going to magnify it.
Yeah. That, like you said, I think it's perfect how you compared it to like with a business or anything global. I mean, it's a principle where if you want to do something well and you want to be successful at something, you kind of form a team, you do some research. Like you don't just say, oh, hopefully I meet someone or like, hopefully I start a great business.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy thought, but it's, for some reason, people don't see it that way in terms of love. Maybe because some people seem to randomly happen across it. But
yeah, and those stories are out there, and there's a lot of those stories where it just kind of randomly happened, which was many of my relationships, because I used to really move from the place where, oh wow, this guy likes me, I'll like him back, because I honestly didn't think I could get what I wanted. I just thought I'll have to take what shows up and try to craft it into something that will work. And then after a while, it's just not going to work. So, certainly people say that there may be that, but how many divorces do we see? How many failed marriages? And then guess what? That requires then losing time to repair and heal, and really time is our only limited resource.
Right.
So if it's important right now in your heart in this moment, then what's keeping you from doing the best thing possible so that you can get there? And sometimes it's really the exact thing that's keeping them in crappy relationships, which is, I don't feel lovable. I don't feel I deserve it. I don't feel worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, all of that can be healed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge personal development junkie, big consumer of it. And one of my favorite people in the personal development space is Darren Hardy. And a couple separate times you've kind of touched on things that he teaches, mostly from a standpoint of business. And the first one was, make something a priority and then really focus on it and get clear on it and then do things to support that priority. And I don't think a lot of people do that, especially in love. So I think that's a great tip. And then the second one you mentioned was thinking about exactly what you want. And I think, once again, there's a parallel between life and business. And I think all of the guests on my show do think about what they want. And I think that a lot of them think that everyone thinks that way. But I would be willing to bet that the majority of people who are single and struggling, or in business, aren't happy with their careers, haven't taken the time to really do a personal inventory to think about exactly who they want in a partner. In your experience, would you say that that's true? And what kind of impact do you think that lack of thought of writing down or really asking yourself who you're looking for makes on your success?
Oh, I think it's so huge. And I'll just give you some examples of what I've seen, because I think it's important to know what we're talking about specifically. I mean, really, when we don't know really what's valuable to us, for example, one of my clients came to me and we were talking about what it is that she really wants to create in her love life. And she said, well, I would like, I go to Catholic Mass regularly. Mm-hmm. And so I would really like someone who at least is okay that I do that.
Sure.
And I said, okay, but what do you actually want? I mean, how important is your spiritual practice, your religion?
Right. Why settle for someone who's okay with it?
Yeah. So, and then when we talked about it, it was really a huge thing in her life. I mean, she was going multiple times a week.
Right.
So really, it was important to step that up.
Yeah.
And so that's just, and same with me. I mean, I noticed in one of the relationships before I met my husband, it was a similar thing. He was really funny and he was successful and mm-hmm. he was fun, but he had zero spiritual practice and didn't really believe in that at all, and even thought yoga was kind of weird. And my practices is Kundalini yoga. I incorporated it into everything I do.
Right.
And he thought it was weird. And that might be fine for somebody, but for me, that was really at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So I needed someone that even could embrace the idea that someone has a spiritual life, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
He just thought it was weird.
How did you overcome that?
We ended the relationship because I was actually at that point.
So this was not Larry. This is a previous.
It was before that, but it was actually during the time when I was really on track. And this is where I was working with my life coach at that time. And she said, isn't this interesting that this is such a huge thing for you and you're continuing this relationship? And it was the hugest aha.
Yeah.
Because look at how fast I was able to fall into that, because we can do this healing work and get really clear and stuff. And as soon as we're faced with a person, mm-hmm. it can be easy to then, in the emotional state, ignore red flags.
Sure.
So that's when I was so grateful that I had support in that space to say, here's what I'm noticing that you're doing.
Right. That's completely logical to me.
Yeah.
Speaking of logic, obviously I have no expertise in the relationship coaching space, but listening to what you said about your client, I feel like even just as a friend to her or something, I would see the value in knowing that, because you'd be like, okay, I suggest you go to Catholic meetups. I suggest you volunteer at activities within your church. I suggest anytime there's a potluck or anything, you go do that, because I feel like in that woman's circumstance, those are great opportunities for her to meet a potential match. Like, just from the practicality of it, and not any expertise needed, but like, if you want someone who likes fish, go to the fish market. Like,
I think it's so true. And if you're really in the space or in the market to meet someone, then it is about dialing those things up a little bit more. And some people get really clinging to, well, I just want to meet someone organically, and
right.
Or that just feels like too much. Well, when we want something, there's not necessarily balance in our life all the time. Sometimes we need to ramp it up a little bit, like we would launching something in our business, like we would moving into a new house. There are times when things are going to be a little extra busy, and expect it. So I like that you said that, because it is adding in. It's absolutely, like, if that's important to you, go to more of that.
Right. I love that. So you've mentioned a life coach, you've mentioned a business coach, so you obviously seek out the expertise of others. I'm wondering if you have any books you would like to recommend to the listeners, and they could be about your niche of love and relationships and play, or just any books that you've enjoyed, even from an entertainment standpoint. But what would you recommend the listeners read?
Well, I have two really major books that I recommend. The first one is, and I have it, I'm just going to reach over and grab it.
Sure.
Just so you can see the cover.
The War of Art.
The War of Art. And the reason why I recommend this one, I recommend it to everyone, because it's all about when we're creating change in our life, the resistance that comes up and what resistance looks like, because it can be so sneaky and so believable. And this really, can you see how many little pieces of paper I have?
Yeah, it looks like you've highlighted some things in there, things you want to go back to.
I go back to it a lot. It's one of those books where I go back and I just read a sentence and I'm like, oh, that's so great. And so I recommend this to anyone who cares about growing and developing in their life, which I'm sure your audience is all over that, because you are, which is great. And then my mentor, who goes by the name of Sark, she has written a whole bunch of books, and she wrote with her beloved John Waddell this book called Succulent Wild Love. And it's a really great relationships and love manual. I feel like it's such a beautiful philosophy, and she's really empowering and playful, and she's my inspiration. I've been in love with her since I was 20. So she's written a lot of books, sold billions of copies of multiple books. So he's just an author I will always recommend.
Okay, fantastic. I love that. Thank you for your recommendations. So I'm curious, it seems like we said, most people who've made bold moves have made a lot of them. And this could have multiple answers as well, but I'm wondering what the scariest thing you've ever done is.
Definitely leaving that comfortable job was was scary. That was definitely a big scary thing. I think the next, actually more scarier than that, was last year. My beloved husband Larry was actually diagnosed with cancer.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
And so, and he's healing. We're getting through it, but I have to say that there's nothing that I've ever experienced as jolting as it was when we got that news. And, you know, in the last year's definitely been challenging for sure. Still is, dealing with the fear, but the bold move within that is jumping into the love even more. And that seems obvious, but it's so easy in these times where, you know, first of all, the word cancer is scary.
Right.
I changed it to can survive.
Ooh, I like that.
Survive. And being willing within that fear to really see everything through the eyes of love was a really bold move. I feel that I can look back on and say, wow, we really approached that experience. And, you know, now I find I get really fearful still. So it's a challenge all the time, but you know, you're hearing stuff from doctors and you have to really digest a lot of information, and people are saying, oh, beat that cancer, you know, get it. And it's like this really aggressive way that we deal with it.
Yeah.
And I just continuously felt the boldness would come from continuously coming back to love and not seeing it as, because it's a part of someone's body. There's a reason it came with the message. And how do we just continually find the love in that experience?
I've never heard anyone talk about cancer that way before, but it makes, my mom's a survivor, and I've interviewed another survivor earlier on this podcast, and it makes sense. And I know a lot of survivors of cancer who have really used it as a tool to improve their lives, and as far as to say they're grateful that it happened. So that makes sense. When you're feeling all of that fear in this situation and the other times you've had to make these risk-taking experiences you've been in, or just on a day-to-day basis with learning how to love yourself, how do you feel the fear and do it anyway? Or how do you fight against the fear? What is your attitude on overcoming it?
Right now, I find that I really want to listen to it. I want to, what I've learned about emotion is that it actually wants to be in motion. And what we generally do is say, oh, I'm scared, or I'm really pissed off, but I'm not supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be. And all of that stops it. It puts a block to it. And that's why, you know, then other things start happening funky in our life. So I'm really practicing being with emotions and using my tools. So using tools like breath work and Kundalini yoga and reaching out to mentors and art and play, imagination, like all of these things that can help let the emotions move. Because when you see them and when you allow them to show up and bring their messages, they transform. So it's still really challenging. I definitely feel like, you know, that's where I am in my life is really being able to balance that. And I'm sure you hear this from people all the time, because as entrepreneurs, you know, we have to get used to that kind of roller coaster of things working out and disappointment and money coming in and money going out, and being able to be more objective in that. And I'm noticing that's happening more and more with me. So that's good.
Yeah, it's such a process, because definitely with myself, and I mentioned how much I value therapy, and this is something that I learned, is that for the longest time I would judge emotions, like determine that this is a good one and a bad one, and anything that was a bad one I pretended I didn't have. And so then, first of all, realizing like, okay, you actually do get angry or you do get sad more than like once a month, when all of a sudden it bubbles up and you can't handle it, is like a really hard step. And then going from there to being like, okay, I recognize now that I am angry, or I recognize now that I am sad. That is not a bad thing. I have to, again, love myself. And then, like you said, figure out then how to deal with it. And that's such a tough process. But I think it's fantastic that you point that out and bring that to the forefront and talking about, staying in motion and how to handle fear. I think that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, this is my favorite question. I always try to save it for last. If little 8-year-old Macy could look into a crystal ball and see where you are now and all of the journeys you've been upon between 8-year-old and now, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Macy be to see where you are now?
She would be really excited.
Like 11 excited?
Yeah, I would say 10 or 11. I mean, I think there's even more. I mean, I feel so blessed to be surrounded by such amazing teachers and an amazing partner and adorable animals and in a great climate. I mean, really, yeah. I want to give 1 point for all the rest that's coming, but that's a pretty emotional question, really.
It's always interesting to see people's responses. And so I love that. Of course, yours is so positive. And one thing that's interesting to me too is several of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed are doing a job that didn't exist when they were 8. So there probably weren't a ton of love and relationship quotes back whenever you were 8, just because I don't think they existed when I was 8, although that wouldn't have been on my radar. But I think it's probably very different from, maybe what you wanted to be when you were 8 or what you imagined ahead of you. What did you want to be when you were 8?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, interesting. Then I wanted to be a performer, but I was so scared to admit that.
Okay.
And I did end up going to college for art and theater and performance. And I have a master's in puppetry arts, which is really bizarre.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, the thing is, I feel like the gift that I have now is that I love teaching and speaking. So one of the things that I put in the forefront of my business is being able to do that. And it feels very much like, education and entertainment, because there are some really sensitive, serious parts of what I teach, but also we can bring some humor to it too.
I feel like you have to when there's serious things. It's part of the only way to survive for me. But
yeah,
I love that. Edutainment. I heard that recently, and I like that term.
Yes.
Entertaining education.
Yeah.
Well, Macy, thank you so much for the time and everything that you've shared while we've been chatting. I thought this was a great conversation, and I hope that anyone who's listening really gets a lot out of it and definitely takes you up on your offer for that guide to finding the perfect guy or person if you're not looking for a guy. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's so great. Thank you for all that you're doing too. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. My pleasure. I really enjoyed Macy's story, and I really hope that you did as well. She is so generous. She is giving away a free guide to find the perfect guy for you, or like we discussed, that applies to men and women. So make sure you check out the show notes for that at www.mandiem.com. macyshusband.com/episode 93 because we are at episode number 93, getting close to triple digits. It's very exciting. But make sure you go there so you can get that free guide from Macy. She is also giving a bonus giveaway to one lucky winner, which is the Play Into Love Dating Success Kit. So if you would like some more dating success in your life, head over to those show notes and enter to win that giveaway. And that's not for people who are just looking for a relationship. I think anyone could benefit from that kit so that you can continue dating even after you're in a relationship and really kind of keep your love alive and fresh. So I hope you loved listening to it. I hope that you're subscribed so that you get Friday's Bold Moves Fearless Fridays challenge and you are ready to challenge yourself outside of your comfort zone and do something spectacular and lovely. Hint, hint. I would also love it if you told everyone else you loved the Bold Moves podcast. So by that I mean if you would go to iTunes and leave a rating, that would be lovely, a review. And also if you love it, share it out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you are. Let your friends know that you love bold moves so that hopefully they will listen and make bold moves themselves. All right, stay tuned for the Fearless Fridays challenge, and without further ado, get on to your sparkly and bold day. You weren't seeing that coming, were you? I switched it up a little bit. All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.